The morning sun struggled to pierce through the thick pines of Yellowstone National Park, casting long, dappled shadows across the forest floor. 6-year-old Emma Carter sat on the porch steps of her family's remote cabin, her small fingers tracing invisible patterns on the worn wood. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of damp earth and pine needles. Birds chattered in the treetops, oblivious to the loneliness pressing against Emma's chest. The world had changed since her father's death. Dr. James Carter had been everything to her, a towering figure of knowledge, kindness, and adventure. He had promised to teach her everything he knew about the wolves he studied. Then, one cold spring morning, he was gone. The official report said it was an accident, a misstep in dangerous terrain, but Emma knew better. Her father had never been careless. And now, 3 months later, the unanswered questions still clawed at her heart. A sudden, guttural howl ripped through the morning air, shattering the silence. Emma froze. This wasn't an ordinary wolf call. It was urgent, raw, something deeper than instinct. She scanned the tree line, her heart pounding. Then she saw it. A massive, gray wolf emerged from the mist, its movements slow and deliberate. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She knew this wolf. Sierra. Her father had spent years observing this alpha female, documenting her pack's behaviors. Emma had seen countless photos of her in her father's research journals. The distinctive notch in her left ear, the piercing amber eyes. But Sierra wasn't alone. Clutched carefully in her powerful jaws was a small, limp body. A wolf cub. Blood matted its dark fur. Emma's first instinct should have been to run. Any other child might have. But she didn't move. She couldn't. There was something in Sierra's eyes, something that made her stay. 10 feet away, the mother wolf slowed, her breath visible in the cool morning air. With deliberate gentleness, she lowered her injured cub onto the ground, just inches from Emma's bare feet. Then, to Emma's astonishment, Sierra stepped back 3 paces, sitting on her haunches, watching her expectantly. Emma's pulse thundered. The wolf was asking for help. "Mom!" She scrambled to her feet, nearly tripping as she bolted for the cabin door. "Mom, come quick!" Inside, Dr. Catherine Carter stood at the kitchen sink, lost in thought as she absent-mindedly washed a dish. The sudden frantic pounding on the doorframe snapped her from her daze. "Emma?" She turned, concern flashing across her face. Emma was breathless, her copper hair wild, her green eyes wide. "Mom, it's Sierra. She brought her baby. He's hurt bad." Catherine's heart clenched at the desperation in her daughter's voice. "Sweetheart, slow down. What do you mean she brought—" "No, Mom, you have to see." Emma grabbed her mother's wrist, tugging with surprising strength. With a mixture of disbelief and urgency, Catherine grabbed a towel and followed her daughter onto the porch. And then she saw it. The great gray wolf sitting at the edge of the clearing, the tiny, wounded cub lying motionless in the dirt. Catherine gasped, her scientist's mind battling against the sheer impossibility of what she was seeing. Wild animals didn't do this. A wolf should never willingly approach humans, let alone entrust them with its offspring. Yet Sierra remained still, watching them with an eerie intelligence. A shiver ran down Catherine's spine. "Oh my God!" Emma knelt beside the cub, her small hands hovering over its frail body. "Mom, we have to help him." Catherine hesitated. This was against every protocol. Injured wildlife belonged in professional care facilities, not private homes. But as she looked into her daughter's pleading eyes, then at Sierra's unwavering gaze, something inside her shifted. A choice had already been made. Catherine exhaled sharply. "All right, but we have to be careful." She reached down, gently wrapping the cub in the towel. It let out a weak whimper, but didn't resist. Emma touched its head soothingly, her fingers brushing against soft fur. "You're gonna be okay," she whispered. As Catherine lifted the bundle, Sierra's ears perked forward. The wolf's muscles tensed, her amber eyes locking onto Catherine's every movement. "She's scared we'll take him away," Emma whispered. Catherine nodded slowly, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll help him, Sierra. I promise." A long, tense moment passed. Then, to their astonishment, Sierra dipped her head. A slow, deliberate motion. "Permission." Emma's breath hitched. The wolf trusted them. Catherine turned toward the house. "Come on, we need to move fast." But as she stepped inside, she hesitated. A nagging thought gnawed at her. This was no random encounter. Sierra had come here for a reason. And deep down, Catherine feared it wasn't just about the cub. It was about James. 20 miles away, Michael Carter adjusted the brim of his ranger hat as he pulled his truck onto a narrow dirt road leading toward his sister-in-law's cabin. His phone had barely stopped vibrating since Catherine's frantic call. His gut told him this was trouble. Michael had spent his career walking a tightrope between conservation and politics. As head ranger of Yellowstone's Southern Division, he had a duty to protect the park's wildlife, but also to navigate the volatile relationships between ranchers, lawmakers, and environmentalists. And now, wolves were at the center of a growing storm. Tensions had been escalating for months. Wolves were being found shot illegally, their bodies left as warnings. Ranchers blamed them for livestock losses. And at the center of it all was his late brother James, a man whose work had challenged everything people thought they knew about these animals. Michael clenched his jaw. He had promised Catherine he'd keep her and Emma safe. But as the trees thinned and the familiar outline of the Carter cabin came into view, a cold dread settled in his chest. Because he knew one thing for certain. If Sierra had come seeking help, it meant something was very, very wrong. The late afternoon sun cast golden hues across the dense forests of Yellowstone, but the air carried an undercurrent of unease. Emma Wilson stood on the porch of her family's cabin, her small fingers gripping the wooden railing. Inside, her mother, Catherine, was on the phone with her uncle, Michael Thompson, the head ranger of the park, trying to explain the impossible. "Michael, you have to believe me." Catherine's voice was urgent but measured. "Emma swears it was Sarah, and the cub, it's hurt, we need help." There was silence on the other end, and then Michael's deep, steady voice. "Kath, even if it was Sarah, we can't just bring a wild wolf inside. You know the regulations." "Michael, I don't care about regulations," Catherine shot back. "A mother wolf doesn't bring her injured cub to humans unless there's no other option. And if this is Sarah, she trusts us." Another pause, then a resigned sigh. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Emma had never stopped watching the mother wolf. Sarah stood at the edge of the trees, pacing with nervous energy, her amber eyes never leaving the small cub lying motionless near Emma's feet. The little wolf whimpered, its body twitching in pain, and Emma felt her chest tighten. "Hang on, baby," she whispered. "Help is coming." Moments later, the distant rumble of a truck engine signaled Michael's arrival. The tires crunched on gravel as his park ranger vehicle pulled up next to the cabin. Stepping out, he was followed by another woman, a middle-aged, sharp-eyed veterinarian named Dr. Laura Chin, one of the park's most experienced wildlife specialists. Dr. Chin crouched next to the cub, her experienced hands moving over its tiny frame. "It's weak, dehydrated. The lacerations are bad, but the real concern is internal injuries." She glanced toward Sarah, who remained tense and watchful. "And I have to say, I've never seen a wolf behave like this before. She's Waiting. Michael exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. This goes against every policy in the book, but I can't ignore what's right in front of me. He turned to Dr. Chin. Can we treat it here? Dr. Chin hesitated, then nodded. I can stabilize it, but we need to get it to the research station where I have better equipment. If we take the cub, though... She looked at Sarah. She may not let us leave without a fight. Emma, still crouched near the cub, turned to face Sarah. Slowly, she reached into her pocket, pulling out an old leather bracelet that had once belonged to her father. It still held his scent, faded but familiar. Holding it up, she whispered, Sarah, we're helping. I promise. The wolf's ears twitched. A deep understanding flickered in her golden eyes. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she let out a soft whine, something between a plea and an acceptance. Sarah stepped back. Dr. Chin worked swiftly, cleaning the wounds, stitching where necessary, and administering pain medication. All the while, Sarah watched, motionless but alert. Finally, they lifted the cub into a crate lined with blankets and moved toward the truck. Sarah let out a low, sorrowful sound, but didn't advance. Michael drove while Catherine sat in the passenger seat, glancing anxiously in the side mirror. Emma and Dr. Chin were in the back with the cub. Through the rear window, Emma watched as Sarah followed at a distance, her form a gray shadow weaving through the trees. She's coming with us, Emma murmured. Dr. Chin glanced at Michael. I've never seen anything like this. Wolves don't just trust humans like this. Sarah isn't just any wolf, Catherine replied. She remembers us. She remembers James. The truck pulled into the research station just as the sky deepened into twilight. The station, once alive with her father's work, now felt eerily quiet. His photographs still lined the walls, snapshots of wolves he had studied, including a young Sarah with her distinctive notched ear. Inside, Dr. Chin got to work, setting up an IV drip and monitoring the cub's vitals. Meanwhile, Michael paced near the window, glancing outside where Sarah stood just beyond the tree line. She was waiting. She won't leave, Emma said softly. She won't leave without him. Catherine exhaled, rubbing her temples. Then, we don't have much time. What do you mean? Michael asked. I mean, she said, voice growing tight, that Sarah's pack has been disappearing one by one. James knew something was wrong. And now Sarah is here alone with just one cub left. Michael's jaw tightened. You think someone's been killing them? I think James was getting close to something. And I think he died before he could prove it. Silence fell. The weight of her words sank in, unspoken fears finally given voice. Dr. Chin, still focused on the cub, finally broke the quiet. We need to get some rest. The cub will be stable for the night, but tomorrow is going to be a long day. Michael nodded, though his expression remained troubled. I'll stay here overnight. Make sure everything stays secure. Catherine sighed. I'll go get blankets for Emma. As the adults busied themselves, Emma walked toward the glass doors, pressing her small hand against the cold surface. Outside, Sarah lay curled at the edge of the station's yard, her gaze never leaving the building. Emma reached into her pocket again, fingers brushing the worn leather of her father's bracelet. I miss you, Dad, she whispered. But I think Sarah remembers you. And I think she needs us now. The night stretched on, stars reflecting in Sarah's eyes as she watched over her cub. And in the research station, Emma drifted into sleep, dreaming of the past, and of the truths yet to be uncovered. The cold night air clung to Emma's skin as she huddled by the window, her small hands gripping the edge of the wooden frame. The research station was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves outside, but her heart pounded with unease. Outside, in the dim glow of the porch light, Sarah's golden eyes shimmered in the darkness. The mother wolf sat silently, her body tense, ears flicking at every distant sound from the forest. She was waiting, watching. Emma glanced back at the sleeping cub nestled in a soft blanket near the old examination table. It had finally drifted into peaceful slumber after a restless night, but Emma knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Wolves weren't meant to be confined, and neither was Sarah. If they didn't find a way to reunite them soon, she feared Sarah might try to take matters into her own paws, and that would put them all in danger. Footsteps creaked on the wooden floor behind her. Emma turned to see her uncle, Michael, standing in the doorway. His ranger uniform was wrinkled, his jaw tight, and there was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "She's still out there?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Emma nodded. "She's not leaving. She won't until she gets her baby back." Michael sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. "That wolf is causing a hell of a stir in town. Half the folks think she's some kind of demon. The other half are ready to put her on a damn postage stamp." Emma scowled. "She's not a demon. She's a mom." Michael gave a weary chuckle and sat down on the edge of the examination table. "Yeah, well, try explaining that to a bunch of ranchers who've lost livestock. And now Carter's got everyone riled up, claiming we're interfering with wildlife management." Emma's stomach tightened. "Carter doesn't care about the wolves. He never did." Michael's expression darkened. "No, he doesn't, and that's what worries me." He exhaled sharply, his fingers tapping absently on the edge of the table. "Listen, Emma, we need to be smart about this. I've got a bad feeling that Carter's not just trying to get rid of the wolves, he's covering up something bigger. Your dad, he was onto something, and I think it got him killed." Emma swallowed hard. She had suspected as much, but hearing her uncle say it out loud made the air feel heavier. "What do we do?" Michael looked at her, his expression unreadable. "First, we get Sarah and her cub out of here safely. Then, we find out what the hell James Wilson died for." An hour later, Catherine, Doctor, Chin, and Joseph gathered around the kitchen table, maps and notes spread out before them. The tension in the room was thick, the weight of their choices pressing down on everyone. "We can't keep the cub here much longer," Dr. Chin said, adjusting her glasses. "It's responding well to treatment, but it needs to be with its mother. Sarah won't wait forever." Catherine nodded. "Then we need to move them. But how?" Joseph traced a finger along the map. "There are old paths leading to the tribal lands. If we can get Sarah and the cub there, they'll be safe. My people will ensure no one touches them." Michael frowned. "That's a long trek, especially with Carter's men crawling all over the park." "Not if we give them something else to chase," Joseph said calmly. "A decoy." Michael considered this. "You mean split up?" Joseph nodded. "A small group takes the wolves to safety. Another leads Carter's people in the opposite direction." Emma's eyes lit up. "I can get Sarah to follow us. She trusts me." Catherine immediately shook her head. "Absolutely not." "But Mom—" "No," Catherine said firmly, her voice tight with fear. "I will not put you in danger." Joseph, however, studied Emma carefully. "She's right. Sarah recognizes her. If Emma calls to her, the wolf will follow." "That's too big a risk," Michael interjected. Joseph folded his arms. "So is trying to sedate and transport a fully grown alpha female wolf. Emma is the only one Sarah trusts." Catherine's face was pale. She looked at her daughter, then at Michael, then back to the table. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, she let out a slow breath. If we do this, we do it carefully. Michael nodded, already formulating a plan. I'll lead the decoy group. We'll take the main road out, make it look like we're moving the wolves. Carter will follow. I'll take Emma, Sarah, and the cub through the old trails, Joseph said. We can reach the reservation lands by sunrise if we move fast. Catherine's grip tightened on the table. I'm going with Emma. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but one look at his sister's expression silenced him. He knew better than to argue with a mother protecting her child. Dr. Chin stood up. I'll prepare the cub for transport. We'll need to be ready before dawn. The plan was set. There was no turning back now. As dawn approached, Emma stood on the porch, her heart pounding as she held out her hand and whispered softly into the morning air. Sarah, come. The mother wolf watched her intently, ears perked forward. A long pause stretched between them. Then slowly, Sarah rose to her feet and took a cautious step forward. Catherine placed a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. Keep talking to her. Emma swallowed and nodded. It's okay, Sarah. We're going together. Your baby is safe. Sarah hesitated a moment longer, then took another step, and another. And then, just like that, she was walking beside them as they disappeared into the forest. The journey had begun. The sun had barely begun its descent when the first sign of trouble appeared. A faint but steady vibration rumbled through the ground, too rhythmic to be natural. Michael, who had been scanning the forest with sharp eyes, turned his head toward the sound, his body tensing. The others followed his gaze toward the tree line just beyond the research station's perimeter. Dust swirled in the distance, kicked up by fast-approaching vehicles. We've got company, Michael said grimly. Catherine, who had been checking on the wolf cub, instinctively pulled Emma closer. Are you sure it's them? Could just be park rangers? Michael shook his head. Not on a road like this, not moving that fast. Joseph Blackfeather, who had been tending to the fire, stood up slowly, his old eyes narrowing. Time to move, he said simply. Dr. Laura Chin was already gathering medical supplies, hastily packing them into a canvas bag. We can't move the cub too fast, she warned. He's still weak. If we jostle him too much, it could do more harm than good. Emma looked up at her mother, her voice tight with worry. Sarah's still out there. What if she tries to protect us? She will, Joseph said solemnly. But she can't fight men with guns. We need to go, now. Michael's radio crackled, and a voice broke through the static. Thompson, you there? It's Greg. Listen, I just picked up chatter from headquarters. Carter's security team is headed your way. They've got orders to retrieve the wolves and shut down your operation. Michael tightened his grip on the radio. How long do we have? 15 minutes, Max. They're coming in fast. Michael exchanged a look with Catherine and Joseph. There was no time for second guessing. All right, everyone grab what you can carry. We're moving out. They had planned for this. Ever since Michael uncovered the truth about Carter's illegal operations and Marcus had defected from the enemy's sight, they knew it was only a matter of time before their adversaries made a bold move. The old mining tunnels Joseph had spoken of would be their best bet for escape, but getting there without being seen was another challenge entirely. Frank Miller had already positioned his truck near the back entrance of the research station. The rugged rancher, once their fiercest opponent, had become an unlikely ally in their fight. You get the girl and the cub out of here first, he told Catherine. I'll buy you some time. Frank, you don't have to... Catherine started, but Frank waved her off. Ain't about what I have to do, it's about what's right. Now go. Michael led the way, guiding them along a hidden footpath that wound through the dense forest. Emma clutched the wolf cub against her chest, feeling its small heartbeat flutter against her own. Sarah had disappeared into the woods earlier, but Emma knew, deep in her gut, that the mother wolf was close, watching over them. The sound of engines drew closer. The security team had arrived. From their concealed position in the underbrush, they could see Carter's men fanning out near the research station. Armed with high-powered rifles and tactical gear, they moved with an efficiency that suggested this wasn't their first covert operation. One of them knelt by the dirt road, touching the tire tracks left by Michael's truck. "They've already moved out," the man called to Carter, who stood beside an unmarked SUV looking irritated. "Then find them," Carter snapped. "I want the wolves, and I want that evidence before it gets out any further. Check the tree line." Michael motioned for the group to stay low and move quietly. They slipped through the forest, keeping to the shadows, the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer behind them. They had almost reached the old mining tunnels when a single gunshot rang out, shattering the tense silence. Emma froze, her heart hammering in her chest. "Sarah!" she whispered urgently, her eyes darting through the trees. "Keep moving!" Michael urged, pushing them forward. But Emma refused. "I can't leave her." She turned, her young face set with determination. "I have to find her." "Emma, no!" Catherine grabbed her daughter's arm, but Joseph stepped forward, his gaze steady. "Let her go," he said gently. "The wolf called to her. She has to answer." Catherine hesitated, torn between protecting her child and trusting the bond Emma had with Sarah. Finally, she nodded. "Michael, go with her. Get her back safely." Michael nodded and followed Emma as she darted into the trees, the wolf cub still cradled in her arms. They found Sarah near the edge of a ravine, her powerful body tense, her fur bristling. A man stood in front of her, his rifle half raised. "Marcus. Stand down, Marcus," Michael called as they stepped into the clearing. Marcus glanced at them, his expression conflicted. "Carter's men are right behind me. You need to get out of here, now." "Not without Sarah," Emma said defiantly. The mother wolf never took her eyes off Marcus. She knew him. She remembered what he had done. But she didn't attack. She only stood her ground, her body a shield between the humans and the approaching threat. "Marcus," Michael said carefully, "you know this isn't right. You know Carter's lying to you." For a long moment, Marcus didn't move. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. "Get out of here. I'll lead them in the wrong direction." Emma hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Thank you." Sarah let out a low growl but didn't attack. She backed away, nudging Emma toward the safety of the tunnel entrance. Emma turned and ran, Michael close behind. The last thing she saw before disappearing into the shadows was Marcus, standing tall, his gun still lowered, as Carter's men broke through the trees. They reached the mining tunnels just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air inside was cool and damp, the space echoing with each breath they took. Catherine exhaled in relief as Emma and Michael appeared, Sarah right behind them. "We made it," Michael panted. But Carter won't stop looking. Catherine looked down at Emma, who still held the cub tightly. "Then we have to make sure he never finds what he's looking for." Joseph nodded. "It's time to bring the truth to light." Outside, the night settled over the forest, and Sarah stood at the entrance of the tunnel, her amber eyes glowing in the darkness. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, they had hope. The sky over the Yellowstone wilderness burned with the soft hues of dawn, casting long shadows through the towering pines. Emma sat beside Scout, the young wolf's amber eyes flickering in the dim morning light. He was stronger now, his wounds healing. his body growing into that of a true, wild predator. But he wasn't just any wolf, he was Sarah's son, and he was meant for something greater. A few feet away, Michael was going over the final details of their plan with Catherine and Joseph. The evidence they had collected, the memory card containing images of Carter tampering with James's safety gear, the recordings of the illegal mineral surveys, was more than enough to bring Carter and his corporate allies to justice. But getting that evidence into the right hands was a different battle altogether. Michael turned to Marcus, who stood off to the side, arms crossed. The scars Sarah had left on him were healing, but something deeper in him had shifted. His loyalty had wavered, but now he was here, standing with them instead of against them. "You sure about this?" Michael asked. "Once we make our move, there's no turning back." Marcus exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I spent years looking out for myself, following orders from people who didn't care about anything but their wallets. James tried to stop me from going down that path, but I didn't listen." He turned to face Michael. "I'm listening now." Michael nodded. That was enough for now. Joseph cleared his throat. "We need to move before Carter's men pick up our trail again. The FBI is on their way, but we have to hold out until they get here." Catherine placed a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. "You're staying close to me," she told her daughter. "No running off." Emma nodded, but her mind was elsewhere, on Scout, on Sarah, on the weight of everything they had lost. She reached down, gently scratching behind Scout's ears. "We have to be brave," she whispered to him. The young wolf blinked up at her, as if he understood. They set out through the dense woods, taking the old, winding paths Joseph knew like the back of his hand. The goal was to reach the edge of the park, where a safe house awaited them, a secluded cabin belonging to one of Joseph's allies on the tribal council. There, they could safely upload and transmit the evidence, but Carter wasn't far behind. The distant thrum of an approaching helicopter sent chills down Michael's spine. He stopped mid-stride, signaling for the group to take cover under the thick brush. The black aircraft hovered above the treetops, its searchlight sweeping the ground below. "They've got thermal imaging," Marcus muttered. "They'll find us if we stay put." "We need a distraction," Catherine whispered. "Something to draw them away from our trail." Emma's fingers tightened around Scout's fur. Then, before anyone could stop her, she stood up. "Scout can lead them away." "Absolutely not," Michael snapped. "That's too dangerous." Emma's face was set with quiet determination. "Sarah trusted us to keep Scout safe, but Scout can help us now. If he runs, they'll track his heat signature instead of ours. He's fast, and he knows these woods better than they do." Catherine opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. There was something in Emma's eyes that reminded her of James, his unwavering belief in the wolves, in their intelligence, in their ability to make their own choices. She turned to Scout, kneeling beside him. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, as if the young wolf could answer. But in a way, he did. He stepped forward, licking Emma's hand, then turned toward the direction of the searchlights. Joseph gave a solemn nod. "The old ones say the wolf walks between worlds, the hunter and the hunted, the wild and the tamed. He chooses his own path." Emma pressed her forehead against Scout's. "Run fast," she whispered. And then, without another word, she clapped her hands and shouted, "Go!" Scout bolted into the trees, his gray form disappearing into the shadows. Moments later, the helicopter shifted direction, its searchlight sweeping after him. The group didn't waste another second. They ran. The safe house was within reach when the first gunshot rang out. Michael shoved Emma behind a fallen log, his weapon drawn. "Stay down!" he barked. Catherine pulled her daughter close. shielding her with her body. Marcus and Joseph returned fire as a group of Carter's men emerged from the trees, moving with military precision. These weren't just hired thugs. They were trained operatives, men who had been sent to ensure none of them left these woods alive. Michael took a deep breath, steadying his aim. "We need to hold them off until the FBI arrives." Emma clutched her mother's jacket, her heart pounding. She was afraid, but deep down she knew they were close, so close to making things right. A sudden growl echoed through the trees. A blur of gray fur lunged at one of the gunmen, knocking him off balance. Scout. He had returned. The young wolf snarled, his fangs bared. He was still growing, still learning. But he was fast, and he was fearless. As Carter's men scrambled, trying to react, Michael seized the moment, firing precise shots that forced them into retreat. The sound of sirens in the distance told them what they needed to know. The FBI had arrived. By the time the dust settled, Carter was in handcuffs, his face pale with rage as the federal agents led him away. His men had surrendered or fled, and Highland Mining's illegal operation was officially shut down. Justice, at long last, had come for James Wilson. Emma sat beside Scout, running her fingers through his thick fur. He was tired but unharmed. He had saved them, just like his mother had. Michael approached, kneeling beside them. "Your dad would be proud," he told her softly. "Of you, of Scout, of everything we've done here." Emma blinked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We finished what he started." Michael nodded. "Yeah, we did." Months later, the research station was renamed the James Wilson Wildlife Study Center. Emma, now 7, stood before a crowd of students and conservationists, speaking with the confidence of someone who had lived a lifetime's worth of lessons in a single year. "My dad believed wolves are more than just predators," she said. "He believed they are family, that they love and protect each other the way we do, and he was right." Scout sat beside her, no longer a cub but a strong, young wolf. He wasn't tame, but he wasn't fully wild either. He was something new, something in between. As the sun set over Yellowstone, a familiar sound rose in the distance, a lone howl carried by the wind. A tribute, a call. Scout lifted his head and howled in return. Emma smiled, knowing that somewhere, somehow, Sarah was still watching over them. Their story wasn't over, it was just beginning.
A female Marine came home to an empty house, then found his war dog starving in the shed. What happened next stunned. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the plains of Western America, bathing the cracked, dusty road in fleeting warmth. Sarah Mitchell stepped from her weathered pickup truck, boots crunching on dry earth. The air carried wild grass and an unsettling heaviness. She adjusted her duffel bag, its weight tugging at her aching back, a reminder of 7 years in the United States Marine Corps in Afghanistan. Her childhood home stood before her, paint peeling, windows dusty, a hollow shell. At 32, war's scars marked her face and eyes. Sarah approached the porch, steps heavy with memory. The house felt too quiet, empty. Her parents had moved away, leaving it to her, but she hadn't been ready to return until now. Diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after a roadside bomb, Sarah had endured months of hospitals and therapy. The Marines had been her purpose, but war took more than it gave. One constant grounded her: Echo, her German shepherd, a military working dog. His amber eyes and steady presence had anchored her in war's chaos, saving her life countless times. A faint whimper broke the silence, coming from behind the house. Her heart raced. Dropping her bag, Sarah followed the sound, boots kicking dust as she reached the backyard. The old shed, half hidden by weeds, stood at the property's edge, its walls warped. The whimper came again, weak, nearly lost in the wind. Sarah's breath caught as she pulled open the creaking door, revealing a heart-wrenching sight. Chained to a rusted pipe lay Echo, a shadow of the powerful German shepherd she knew. His coat was patchy, matted with dirt, ribs jutting out sharply. His once sharp eyes were cloudy, staring blankly. Flies swarmed sores on his legs, his tail limp. "Echo," Sarah whispered, voice breaking. He didn't move, only whined faintly. She knelt beside him, hands hovering, afraid he'd break. Memories surged. Echo leaping to shield her, dragging her from gunfire. His warmth against her in desert night. He was her partner, her family. Now he was abandoned, left to die. Tears fell as Sarah touched his matted fur. "It's me, Echo. It's Sarah." His ears twitched, eyes distant. She whispered their training command, "Sits." A pause, then a faint flicker in his gaze. His head lifted, trembling, and their eyes met. The look shattered her. Sobbing, she wrapped her arms around him, guilt and rage overwhelming. Injured and sent home, she'd assumed Echo was retired or reassigned, but someone had left him here, forgotten. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I won't let you go." Unhooking the chain, she lifted his frail body and carried him to her truck. The sun sank as she drove to the veterinarian, determined to save the dog who had saved her. The rural veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and damp fur, its fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the cracked linoleum floor. Sarah Mitchell sat on a hard plastic chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, watching as Dr. Linda Carter, a veterinarian with silver-streaked hair and a calm, practiced demeanor, examined Echo. The German shepherd lay on the steel table, his breathing shallow, his body so frail it seemed the table might swallow him. Dr. Carter, who had volunteered with animal rescue organizations in war-torn regions, moved with quiet precision, her fingers tracing the sores and scars on Echo's matted coat. "Severe malnutrition," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "He's lost nearly half his body weight. The skin infections are advanced, likely from prolonged neglect, and these scars—" She paused, pointing to jagged marks on Echo's legs and flanks. "These weren't caused by the environment. They're consistent with deliberate harm, possibly from a whip or sharp object." Sarah's jaw tightened, her nails digging into her palms. She nodded, unable to speak, her eyes fixed on Echo's dull gaze. Sarah stayed by Echo's side as Dr. Carter administered fluids and antibiotics, her hands trembling as she held the dog's paw. She fed him small portions of soft food, careful not to overwhelm his weakened system, and applied medicated salve to his sores. Each day she drove the 30 miles to the clinic, sitting with Echo for hours, speaking softly to him about nothing and everything. She recalled their time in Afghanistan, where Echo had been a star among military working dogs, his keen nose detecting explosives hidden in rubble, his steady presence shielding her squad from ambushes. She remembered the night he'd dragged her, dazed and bleeding, from a burning vehicle after a roadside bomb detonated, his teeth clamped gently but firmly on her sleeve. When she was medically evacuated, her leg shattered and her mind fractured by trauma. She'd assumed Echo was retired or reassigned to another handler. The thought of him suffering alone hadn't crossed her mind until now. Late one night, unable to sleep, Sarah called a former squad mate, Corporal Daniels, who had stayed in touch. His voice grew quiet as he revealed the truth. After Sarah's injury, Echo was sent to a private training facility contracted by the military. The facility, underfunded and poorly managed, had a reputation among veterans for neglecting retired dogs. They said he was unfit for reassignment, Daniels told her. No one checked on him after that. Sarah hung up, her chest tight with guilt and anger, vowing to make things right. Days turned into weeks, and Echo began to respond. His eyes, once clouded, grew clearer, and his ribs became less stark beneath his skin. Sarah used the German commands they'd trained with, shop familiar words like Platz and Bleib. At first, Echo only twitched his ears, but one evening as Sarah sat cross-legged on the clinic floor, reading aloud from an old novel, he lifted his head and gave a faint tail wag. The motion was weak, almost imperceptible, but it sent a warmth through Sarah's chest, a spark of hope. She reached out, stroking his head, and whispered, "You're still in there, aren't you?" His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of recognition, a trace of the dog who had been her partner. Caring for Echo gave Sarah something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. Her post-traumatic stress disorder still woke her with nightmares, flashes of fire, screams, and blood, but they came less often now. Echo's steady breathing beside her, even in the clinic's kennel, grounded her. She began to talk more, not just to Echo but to herself, piecing together fragments of who she was before the war. Each small victory, Echo finishing a bowl of food, standing without trembling, felt like a step toward healing for both of them. As she drove home one night, Echo curled in the passenger seat. Sarah knew they were rebuilding more than his body. They were rebuilding trust, loyalty, and a bond the war had tried to break. The autumn evening settled over the small town, the air crisp and laced with the scent of fallen leaves. Sarah Mitchell walked along the gravel path near the local park, her boots crunching softly, the fading light casting long shadows across the grass. Echo, her German shepherd, strode beside her, his coat now thick and glossy, a stark contrast to the skeletal figure she'd found months ago. His amber eyes gleamed with alertness, his head held high, every step exuding the quiet confidence of a dog restored to strength. After weeks of care, Echo had transformed, his military training evident in the way he stayed close, always scanning their surroundings, a loyal guardian. Sarah felt safer with him near, his presence a steady anchor against the lingering unease of her post-traumatic stress disorder. The park was nearly empty, save for a few joggers in the distance and the hum of crickets rising with the dusk. Sarah's hand rested lightly on Echo's leash. Though he didn't need it, he moved in perfect sync with her. She was lost in thought, reflecting on how far they'd come, when a rustle in the bushes snapped her back to the present. A man emerged, his hoodie pulled low over his face, his posture tense and purposeful. He moved toward her, too fast, his hand reaching into his jacket. "Hey, lady, don't move," he growled, his voice low and threatening, a glint of metal flashing in his hand. Sarah's heart raced, her muscles tensing, old instincts from the battlefield kicking in, but before she could react, Echo did. The German shepherd's ears pinned back, a deep, guttural growl rumbling from his chest. In a blur of motion he lunged, his leash slipping free from Sarah's hand as he closed the distance. The man stumbled back, startled, but Echo was faster, his jaws clamping onto the man's arm with precision, not tearing, but holding firm, forcing him to the ground. The knife clattered to the pavement, skittering out of reach. Echo stood over the man, his growl steady, his eyes locked on the threat, every muscle taut with controlled power. The men shouted in panic, struggling under Echo's weight, but the dog's training held. He restrained without maiming, his actions deliberate, honed by years in combat zones. Sarah's hands shook as she pulled her phone from her pocket, dialing 914-811 with fumbling fingers. "Help! I'm at the park on Elm Street. Someone tried to attack me," she said. Her voice steadied despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Echo remained unwavering, his gaze never leaving the man, his body a shield between Sarah and danger. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, and 2 police cruisers pulled into the park. Officers approached cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the twilight. "Ma'am, step back," one called, but Sarah stayed close, her hand resting on Echo's back as he held his position. The officers cuffed the man, who was still muttering protests, and led him to the cruiser. One officer, a middle-aged man with a kind face, knelt to look at Echo. "That's one hell of a dog," he said, shaking his head in awe. As the police took statements, a small crowd gathered. Joggers, neighbors, a teenager with a phone recording the scene. Sarah knelt beside Echo, her hands running through his fur, her heart swelling with gratitude. She saw it in his eyes, the same fierce loyalty she'd known in Afghanistan, when he'd stood between her and death. This wasn't just instinct. It was Echo's way of repaying her, of proving he hadn't forgotten the bond they'd forged in the chaos of war. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "You saved me again, boy." The crowd murmured, some clapping softly, their faces a mix of shock and admiration. Word of the incident spread quickly, whispered among the townsfolk, a story of a dog who had come back from the brink to become a hero. Sarah knew this was only the beginning. Echo's courage would ripple far beyond this quiet park. The video spread like wildfire across social media, a grainy clip captured by a teenager in the park that evening. It showed Echo, the German shepherd, pinning the would-be attacker to the ground, his movements precise, his growl steady, while Sarah Mitchell stood behind him, phone in hand, calling for help. By morning, the video had thousands of views, shared by locals, then picked up by veterans groups and animal rights advocates. Comments flooded in, calling Echo a hero, a survivor, a symbol of loyalty. News outlets caught wind, and soon a local reporter reached out, asking to interview Sarah. She hesitated, unaccustomed to attention, but agreed, driven by a need to honor Echo's courage and shine a light on the plight of military working dogs. Sarah sat under the oak tree in her front yard, Echo resting at her feet, his amber eyes calm but watchful. The reporter, a young woman with a notepad, listened intently as Sarah recounted their story, finding Echo starving in the shed, nursing him back to health, and his selfless act in the park. "He's more than a dog," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. "He's my partner. He saved me in Afghanistan, and he saved me again here." The segment aired that night, and by the next day, the story had gone national. Major networks replayed the park footage, pairing it with photos of Echo's recovery, his skeletal frame transforming into the powerful dog he'd once been. Social media erupted with hashtags Echo the Hero, Honor Military Dogs, drawing support from across the country. Moved by the response, Sarah joined a veterans online forum where she shared Echo's full story, from their time in combat to his abandonment and redemption. She wrote of the countless other military working dogs left in neglect, urging reform in how they were treated after service. Her post resonated deeply, shared by thousands of former service members who knew the bond between handler and dog. Donations poured in, small sums from strangers, larger ones from advocacy groups, to fund Echo's ongoing care and support other forgotten dogs. Sarah set up a fund, determined to use the money to help dogs like Echo, those left behind when their service ended. Sarah began speaking at community events, small gatherings at first, veterans halls, local schools, where she and Echo stood side by side. Echo, with his sleek coat and steady gaze, drew gasps and smiles, his presence commanding respect. Sarah shared their journey, her voice steady as she spoke of war, loss, and healing. Each event deepened their bond. Echo would nudge her hand when she faltered, his warmth pulling her through. She felt a purpose she hadn't known since leaving the United States Marine Corps, a way to channel her pain into something greater. Echo, too, seemed to thrive, his tail wagging gently as children petted him or veterans shook Sarah's hand, their eyes misty with shared understanding. The community rallied around them. A local artist painted a mural of Echo on the town's library wall, his silhouette bold against a desert sunset, a tribute to resilience. Sarah's inbox overflowed with messages, stories of other dogs, offers to volunteer, requests for her to speak farther afield. She realized Echo's story was no longer just theirs. It had become a beacon for those who believed in second chances. As she and Echo walked home one evening, the stars bright above the plains, Sarah felt a quiet strength growing within her. They were not just survivors, but catalysts, sparking change that would ripple far beyond their small town, setting the stage for a legacy yet to unfold. The invitation arrived in a crisp envelope, its gold-embossed seal catching the morning light on Sarah Mitchell's kitchen table. She opened it with steady hands, her eyes scanning the formal words. An invitation to speak at the National War Dog Memorial Ceremony in Washington, D.C. A tribute to military working dogs and their service. A special dedication would honor forgotten dogs, those left behind after their duty ended, and Echo, her German shepherd, would receive a medal for his resilience. Sarah glanced at Echo, lying on a soft blanket by the window, his once powerful frame softened by age, his muzzle silvered. His amber eyes met hers, calm and knowing, and she felt a swell of pride. They had come so far, and now their story would echo beyond their small town. The ceremony took place on a crisp spring day, the Washington Monument rising against a clear sky. Thousands gathered, veterans in pressed uniforms, families holding small American flags, children clutching their parents' hands. Sarah stood at the podium, Echo at her side, a lightweight vest adorned with a gleaming medal resting on his shoulders. His presence was regal, his gaze steady despite the years. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice clear as she began. "I came home from war carrying scars no one could see," she said, her words carrying over the silent crowd. "I thought I was alone, broken by what I'd seen, what I'd lost. But Echo was carrying those scars too. He fought beside me in Afghanistan, saved my life more times than I can count, and when I found him, starving, chained, forgotten, he taught me that love and loyalty can heal even the deepest wounds." She paused, her hand resting on Echo's head. "He didn't just survive, he chose to protect, to love, to fight for me again." The crowd was still, some wiping tears, others nodding as her words sank in. Echo shifted, his eyes scanning the faces before him, and Sarah continued. "We failed him once, left him to suffer, but he never gave up on us. Now it's our turn to do better, for him, for every dog who served, for every veteran who needs a reason to keep going." Applause rose, soft at first, then thunderous, as veterans saluted and families clapped, their faces alight with emotion. Echo's tail gave a single proud wag, and Sarah felt her throat tighten. This was their moment, their high point, a testament to a bond forged in fire and rebuilt through care. In the months that followed, Sarah channeled the momentum into action. She founded Echo's Legacy, a nonprofit dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating retired military working dogs. The organization tracked down dogs languishing in shelters or neglected by private contractors, offering them medical care, training, and homes. It also paired these dogs with veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, creating bonds that healed both canine and human. Donations from the public, inspired by Echo's story, funded kennels, veterinary services, and therapy programs. Sarah worked tirelessly, traveling to meet dogs and veterans, her days filled with purpose. Echo, though slower now, remained the heart of the mission, his image on every pamphlet, a symbol of what was possible when loyalty met compassion. One early morning, as the first light of dawn touched the plains, Sarah sat by the lake near her home, a place she and Echo had walked countless times. Echo lay beside her, his breathing steady, his eyes still bright despite the cloudiness of age. Next to him sat a young German shepherd, recently rescued from a failing kennel, his frame lean but eager, his gaze fixed on Echo as if learning from a mentor. Sarah smiled, her hand resting on Echo's side. "You'll show him the way, won't you?" she whispered to the young dog. "Just like you showed me." The sunrise spilled over them, painting their shadows across the grass, a quiet tableau of peace. There was no war here, no pain, only the warmth of a bond that had carried them through darkness. Sarah looked out at the water, its surface catching the light, and felt a deep calm. Echo's legacy wasn't just in the dogs saved or the veterans helped. It was in the way he'd reminded her to live, to fight, to love. Their story had become a call to action, a reminder that heroes, human and canine, deserve honor, not abandonment. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah knew their work would continue, carried forward by those they'd inspired. To the world, she and Echo offered a simple truth. Loyalty and love could mend what war had broken, and in saving each other, they could save others too. So, to those who hear this story, let it linger. Support the silent heroes, the forgotten warriors, and believe always in the power of second chances. Sarah and Echo's journey, from war's chaos to a quiet lakeside dawn, shows that love and loyalty can heal the deepest wounds. Their story, a beacon for forgotten heroes, lives on through Echo's legacy. If their bond moved you, join Amazing Paws Stories. Like, share, and subscribe to celebrate the courage of canine warriors and the power of second chances.